The first one we're dealing with, and I want you to see it. How many of you remember the movie Miracle on Ice?
Yes. I remember the game.
How many of you remember seeing the actual Olympics and seeing the U.S. team win? So it was that.
My mama. Screamer.
Before I forget it.
No problem.
And but anyway, we're going to look at what Coach Brooks says, and we'll get to that in a minute. But here we are. We're dealing with the interesting thing. As you read this, you're finding out that Mark Davis is writing the generation that was 40 years in the wilderness as generation test.
Yes.
And the new one is the generation rest. And so we're looking at, and I like the way he put it there, but we're only going to look at the first speech that involves Moses talking, and it's this speech that we have. It's in the very first chapter, and it actually we'll go through 4 chapters, but we're not going to go that far into it. But then again, it picks up and does another one. He does a second one, and then he does a third one before, as the book of Deuteronomy becomes finalizing. And so that was where we are. Thoughts? As you read it, what's your thoughts? And don't be bashful. We're not Quakers. It's not silent time, okay? It's speak up time. You have your feelings. And there are no wrong answers, and there are no wrong questions, all right? So I don't know what you thought about it, but I was interested to see the author put and compare it to Moses, and also compare it to the Miracle on Ice, and how we're looking at that, because he's dealing with a yes, ma'am. Oh, your seat's over there.
She's sitting with me. I wondered if she's okay.
I was talking to Joy about shoes.
Okay.
She's not in here yet either, is she?
Oh, is she coming?
She's supposed to be.
She's here.
She's here. She's in the kitchen.
Well, she's getting ready. You realize that
She's
going to be doing some things there.
she's with Melinda and
I hate this thing ringing in my ears.
What about,
Yes.
somewhere I've seen it, and I just can't retain it, but somewhere I've seen listed exactly, the first speech is this verse through this, no. Is it, can you tell me where that's written down?
Go on in.
Is there enough room?
Oh, yeah, we'll make room. Let me get some chairs. There's some rolling chairs back over there if you want to sit. There's one there. Sit there. And it's going. Joy's going to have to come in and find her a place here in a minute, too. She can sit right over here. Yeah.
They're still
Oh,
running.
all right, good. We'll put one more right here.
where's your chair?
I've got a chair. There's some rolling chairs there, but
I've got the chair that was right there.
you got the chair that was where?
I took the chair from right there.
Are you going back there or you gonna sit
Do
there?
you want a rolling chair?
No, I'm right.
Because you usually that's.
Yes, if it's not too much trouble.
Yeah, they're right there.
My back starts
Maybe
hurting, I
another
start
one.
moving
Maybe
around.
that one and then get another.
She just took a picture on my phone, and they were doing this craft project.
Joy can sit over here, or somebody can sit right there. Well, it's not Saturday night yet.
Paper.
Joy?
Joy, come up here.
You're sitting right there. We're up here.
Well, while you get here, I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. I'm sorry. I have to have something to get me going. Good morning. Oh, God. Well, it's talking in order over here.
I can yell at her. Sometimes she listens, sometimes she won't, but when I say that, she doesn't.
Okay, they're right here.
Oh, that's okay.
Who doesn't have a book?
I named her Daisy. Lou is short for
No, she's over in the office. What do you need? Well, you get with it, Brenda. On there. Who else needs a book? You have yours, don't you? But we have 2 more up here.
My son has.
You can't get lost in this, but back to your question, Sue.
Can I? The longest speech is
What, you
chapters
what?
4 through 26.
Chapters, 4 through 26, that's a long speech.
Well, there's three speeches, okay? The first one goes through 4, all right? The second one goes to,
One of them goes to
Yeah, he
26.
needs to sit down, I need to move the camera.
yeah, but anyway, we're not gonna get into all of that because you gotta realize,
You can sit down or I'll move the camera. That's all. You're out of the frame. Oh,
Right
no,
now.
wait, I can get you in the
I
frame.
prefer to stay out of the frame.
I can get you. I can get you. I can do the whole, never mind, I did the whole room and you're fine, or about all in.
Oh, okay.
Your head was gone.
Body.
But that's a normal situation there. It stays normal. But, they're the 3 speeches and the whole thing. But, the whole book is written by Moses, except I think the very last part of it is closed out by Joshua because Moses had already died. But that's a issue that we want to look at it. But anyway, as you look at these, we're just thinking this first verse, this first speech, and he's like telling them, you can do this, all right? Now, think about that. Mike, you want to bring up the coach's speech?
Okay, I got it.
It's on the screen up here.
I hate to bother you, are we on chapter 1? I didn't know.
Chapter
Yes.
1, yes. Not the intro, but chapter 1. It has no numbers on the book.
Yeah, I saw that. No pages.
Okay, here you go, you gotta be quiet.
You got the volume all the way up.
Fine.
That's all the one we got.
Well, there's nothing yet.
Was it playing Kurt Russell? Is that right?
I have no idea, don't really care.
I was looking at it.
You can find out.
I don't remember who played it.
All the memory things.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell.
Unimportant.
Thank you. I think I was just bullied.
Great moments are born of great opportunity. And that's what you have tonight. That's what you earned here tonight. One team. If we play them 10 times, then I win 9.
Come closer.
Not this game.
We can't hear it, Mike.
That's as loud as it'll go, come forward.
That's right. If anybody needs to go up there, fine.
We escape them. Tonight, we stay them. And we shut them down because we can. Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team. You were born to be hockey players. Every one of you. You were meant It's over. I'm sick and tired of hearing about what a great hockey team the Soviets have. Screw 'em. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
What's his name?
How did you get off that?
That's it.
I
We'll see. Well, I'm going to show you the last minute anyway. But that's what he's saying, that this was what transpired with the Israelites. Moses gave that kind of speech, as you heard and as you read that first chapter. And the fact he told them, you've already got this. In other words, it's yours. And so we have this overwhelming obstacles. All of us have ultimate dreams, and we have them in our lives. But here was one that they really and truly compared, and I like the way Mark compared the speech that Brooks made to the hockey team. It was very much like, if you read it, I've read Deuteronomy, I've studied Deuteronomy, but I never really thought about Moses' speech being like that one of Brooks. And I admire him for bringing those together. You know, we discovered in the midst of all this, I didn't hear it, but I remembered I heard it before. He did say, you were born for this. Yeah. All right? And that's what Moses was saying to the Israelites. You were born for this. And it goes back to the thing that we were thinking about before, where he says, it took 11 days, or ever how you want to get there, but it took them 40 years, and we're going to ask the questions and your thoughts here at the end. I don't know if you've looked at that or not, but in Deuteronomy, we discover a generation of upstarts, as he says, that are really and truly, Egypt is gone, and they don't have that anymore, and their parents had wandered for 40 years, arguing, didn't like what God was doing, and they didn't agree with it, refused to do as God told them to do. You ever done that? What's happened to you when you've done that?
Trouble.
Well, you think about the time. There comes a time when you have, like you said, you were born for this, all right? I know what it's like to be in the wilderness for 40 years, and I know what transpired when Tom Weir said to me, I have a church that needs you, and I looked at him like he had a bug on his face, because I said, what are you talking about? But that was God saying, hey, you've spent your 40 years in the wilderness, now it's time for you to get busy and do what you need to be doing. And so that's really and truly what was transpiring with the Israelites. They were there, and they had this thing. You got to realize, have you ever been discouraged? How long does it take you to get over the discouragement? Sometimes, and don't be Quaker, speak up if talking about, they were born for that moment in history, all right? And that's interesting because he brings it out later in this chapter, is the fact that even though they were 40 years late getting there, or 339 years and 300 some odd days getting there, there was nobody else there waiting to go in. Did you read that part and think about that when you realize it? You see, Moses was that kind of leader that Herb Brooks was for the hockey team. He was that. He inspired him. He got him to go. Because if you go back and read that, if you read that first chapter in the book of Deuteronomy as well, you find that he is saying, it's your time. You're here now. Don't worry about the 40 years there. It's your time. And so we're there. So we need to be, our generation today, somebody asked me the other day a question, what did I think was going to happen in our world today because of so much stuff going on? And I'm an optimist. Sometimes I'm a cockeyed optimist in the middle of it all. And I'm sort of to the point like what he was saying about this one. I think there's a generation inspired behind us, all right? That, Joy and I have come through several generations, all right? Our generation was the one that they classified the great one, all right? And then we have children that were on the far end of the baby boomers, all right, or at that part of it. So we look at this, but here we are, when we think about it, when I read all of this and wondering, and do I have a right perspective in my life? Do you? It's the interesting part that he says here. And like I told you, he read this, if you look in your book and you see it with the scripture, he's made bold and put it across there. He used it from the ESV, which is the English-speaking version, and then he put the word cross in there. There was the cross of Jordan. And so that gave him the idea of Moses. They said Moses was speaking across the Jordan, but he was really beyond it. But the way he talks, he's crossed over. But Moses never got to cross over. He didn't get there, God had told him he wouldn't. So we're looking at it. But he's speaking, as he said, with a nation, and he's giving them confidence, like Brooks was giving that hockey team confidence to go. And I have to think about it. How do we encourage the generation today to become, believe, and also become energetic and be involved? I saw something the other day that says, do you realize what the blue light from your cell phone does to you all the time? It does have its effect on you. But as I was reading and thinking about it, I thought, wow, how do we get away from so much of that and get into what it's like and put it away and see where we are? So what were your thoughts when you did? What did you think of this Upstart group?
Upstart group.
I'm talking about Generation Rest, all right? Okay. This is the Upstart group.
I had read the book and, I knew where you were coming from as far as what we hoped, but I didn't get it until I saw the clip, because I react to emotion, and that is an emotion. I mean, the art did it for me. The most important thing to me is how do we apply what we've learned. And, until I learned it, I didn't know what to ask about. And I get it. Each one of us will have our own response to the learning, what Deuteronomy, what really happened in history with the generations, which is kind of awesome. But my big question, my thoughts on it are, what are we waiting for? None of us are getting any younger. Of course, we could say that to a room full of 5-year-olds, but none of us are getting any younger. And so I have some impatience with, which is probably part of my nature, with what are we waiting for? And that's what I see in Mabelvale Methodist Church. When I say this, it sounds like I'm being derogatory about something. I'm not. But when we made a decision about disaffiliation, to me, that was a kind of a turning point. It was kind of like coming clean, good, bad, or indifferent. You know, some of us may agree or disagree. It was not, you know, about our faith. It was about our choice for living our faith. And so it's like, what's stopping us now? What a beautiful place to do that speech, which is why you chose this study. I have to assume it's so fitting, it's so appropriate, and there it is right there.
I got to thinking about this. He writes about he has no directions, but he talks about his son. They were in a subway in Boston, and his son came out, and when his son stepped out of the subway exit on the street, he knew he knew all of his directions. He knew where north, south, east, and west was. He had no concept, but he couldn't. He got down under there, and he's blinded. Do you guess that for 40 years they didn't know which way was? How did they wind up where they were?
They had
I mean-
something to follow.
When
Do what?
everybody
They
else-
had something to follow.
God was good.
But what were they following?
God's direction.
Were they? If they'd have followed God's directions, they would have been there in 11 days.
He didn't want to be God's direction.
Oh, listen to this over
Where was
here.
the smoke?
Do what?
Where were the pillars that were leading them?
Well, that was coming in there, but Kathy Sue just said it. God didn't. They weren't ready to get there yet. God knew this. All right. It was sort of like me in my 40 years. God knew I was not ready to be in there. That's where we are. But I thought about directions. Do you have problems with directions? Do you always know what north, south, east, and west is?
Ask my wife.
Do what?
Ask my wife, she'll tell you.
I can't do it.
Do you
Do what?
follow directions?
North. But I wrote a thing back a while back on my articles about a portalon. Do you know what a portalon is?
A what?
Portalon. Portolan. It was a chart that the sailors used before they even had maps. All right, but it had no north, south, east, and west on it. But yet it did tell them where the ports were and this sort of thing. But when you think of that, it's having us. How would you get anywhere if you didn't have? Today you'd have GPS, right?
Right.
When I was a kid growing up, I always knew that when you looked at a map, the top of it was north, right? Unless you screwed it around and did something else with
Turn
it.
it upside down.
But that's important, and I think Kathy Sue is right. God let them just wander, all right? And they were complaining all the time. You ever had people like that? Right? Nothing satisfies them. Nobody's happy. And they were going. So it was thinking like he was talking about to him, every country road was just a road to him. He had no idea. And I feel like what he says happened in his life was what really and truly was transpiring in generation test, the first generation that didn't get there. In other words, they were so not doing what God said. God says, okay, but you're not going to get into the promised land. Now, Moses couldn't get there. Anybody know why Moses was denied entry into the promised land?
He struck a rock twice.
That's right. But he stuck it the second time in anger because they were barking at him instead of getting all the noise. But anyway, there's so when you think about directions in our lives and where we are and where we're going, it's we have trouble orientating ourselves in a lot of ways with that. And so, how many of you, when you take out, think of what direction you're going? When you get in your car and back out of your drive and you head out, do you think about, I'm headed west?
Think about it.
Unless the sun is.
Or whatever direction your car's pointing in. Like Joy says, it's like us for breakfast, and the sun pops up over the horizon and comes right into our breakfast table. But and so we have to move around so it wouldn't be so bright. But that's what some people have a sense of directions, but I think that I'm thinking with Kathy Sue that God didn't let them have the sense of direction because they weren't listening. In other words, they might have been hearing him, but they weren't listening, and they were denying him what they do. So the kind of orientation and directional, the things that Mark was writing about, but Moses provided for that generation. In other words, as they got closer, and those ones that were starting out and disappearing, they died. All right? Do you realize how many babies were born in those 40 years in the wilderness? Well, the midwives were busy, weren't they? Did you think in your mind that there were 1 million or more Israelites? Had you thought about it being that large?
Till recently.
Do what?
How about funerals?
Well, I'm sure there were a lot of burials, but that's not interesting. It's not ever said, is it? There's no comments about that. You go back and read Exodus, and you come back and read Deuteronomy. There's nothing in there. All of the falderall that's going on, and they're arguing because we don't have food and we don't have water and we don't have directions. And you put the clouds and the flame to give them directions. What was that to you? That's like a GPS, isn't it? I call it the GPS. I call it God's points. Okay, He's pointing you in the direction you want to go. So that's when you think of it. Moses looked at the nation of Israel as Coach Brooks looked at that group of amateur players. All right, you realize he had that type of people right there. They were not that old in their lives. Joshua and Caleb are the only two that had a positive thought that we could do this. It says take courage. I was interested that you're not too late. Have you ever said, "Oh, I'm late"?
Many times.
We have two girls. One is always 5 minutes late. The other one is always 5 minutes early. That's their choices, and that's the way it is. How many people know that worship is at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and you're saying, "Okay, I can sleep 5 more minutes," and all of a sudden you're rushing to get there on time. We do that in our lives. But what were your thoughts? I'm doing all the talking. I want you to tell me your thoughts as to how you've read what Mark said and what it meant to you. What does it mean? Has it given you new insight into Moses? Has it given you new insights into the generation rest? Has it given you new insights of God involved in all of this?
It's like your parents tell you to do something and you just don't want to do it that way, and they know you're not going to be killed or anything, so it's all right, and you go your own way, and then all of a sudden, yeah, they were right. It just didn't work. That's kind of how it struck me.
Do what, Mark?
There is some of that, but I think that, I used to teach Taekwondo, and a lot of the times, the underbelts would not advance as they would unless they were given some kind of goal or direction. And they had to internalize it. But they also had to internalize the notion that they were capable. So the black belt or the brown belt or whatever didn't just beat them, win every match. They let the student win until they figure out, hey, this is something that I can do.
All right. Did you do that way when you were raising your children?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
My children always said to me, "Dad, I wish you'd spank me rather than talk to me."
Oh, no. That hurt.
Mama's look. Or the look, yes, don't look over your glasses, Dad. So that's what it is. But the 40 years, does that mean anything to you? How many times do we find situations with numbers throughout the Bible? And there's a lot of 40 years, or 40s. How long was Christ in the wilderness?
40
days.
All right. And that's what we do with Lent. All right. It's 40 days excluding Sundays, and so that's where we are. And you get to realizing that it cracked me up as I read this. I had never really put the time zone. I mean, I knew it was from here to here was a short period of distance, but they did all of this for 40 years, wandering all around. But I don't know that you can make it an hour and a half in a car.
Probably not
You
direct.
know, a helicopter in 10 minutes.
Yeah, probably.
When you start putting that thing in, you're wondering, wow, were they that bad that God had to get them to get their heads screwed on right?
I'd get rid of it.
Yes.
What little bit I've read this morning makes me ashamed of some of the thoughts that I have about who's coming up behind us to run our country. Because the same thing is happening here, you know, they're not, I catch myself a lot of times, I can't believe these are the people gonna run our country, you know, our generation and the generation before me, my parents. We're such amazing, strong, awesome generation, and then my generation's a little bit less, and then the ones coming up behind me. I mean, the ones my kids are in and your kids are in.
And our grandchildren.
Yeah, it makes me ashamed because it makes me think, you know, I need to do what Moses did. You know, take more time to try to encourage them to, but you know, it's gonna happen the same way with them it did with these.
One of the advantages of having your Wi-Fi tower go down is Joy and I got to just relax and watch some CDs that we had of developing the west part of the United States. And as I got to looking at this, there they were trying to get to where they were going, how long it took them to get to where they wanted, how long it took them to, once they settled, to build what they wanted to build. And I'm looking at that as to saying, do we have that kind of determination today in our life? Are we that adventurous today?
I'm not.
Or would we want to do that again? Would you want to leave Independence, Missouri on a car-stolen wagon, you know, going across there, and how they, you know, would you do that?
No, because when we're watching westerns, that's something we should not say. Boy, I'm glad we did.
Well, but my prayer is, Mary Beth, is I'm glad they did it because they did it so that I don't have to do it, and they built it. And now you get to see what's transpired. When I fly over, I used to fly back and forth to the West Coast all the time, and I flew over that area, and I looked at that, and I said, they crossed this in wagons and walking. You know, now I'm landing at LAX, and there's how many million people here now? And when you think of it, but that happened in Israel, didn't it?
Yeah.
Once they crossed over, you know, and I love the way Moses said, you know, Brooks was telling them, yes, you've done these things. All right, but Moses was telling the Israelites, you had these victories in Sihon. You had these victories at Og. You know, so he's reminding them, you've had them, and you can still have it. But a lot of times we back off. We said, okay, we've got this, but those people are bigger than what we thought they were or something. But I got to thinking about this. Moses is speaking to a generation that he's encouraging them to finally cross the Jordan River. They didn't really want to cross, did they? But if Moses had not given them the encouraging speech that he gave them, like Brooks gave the hockey team, they wouldn't have stepped out into it.
Well, how do we do that to the generation behind us?
I think it's obedience. I agree with you totally. But you know, why are we worried about what's coming behind us? We think, well, we're not really using the right ruler. I mean, you know, measure. They're not making decisions like so how do you encourage them? I think there's only one answer. We turn back to God. Because you've got to have that true north. You've got to have those leaders.
By your life, that's all you
There's-
can do.
Okay, if you look,
Just about the generation coming up behind us, it seems so different. And I know everybody's different. Every generation is different, but sometimes they don't make the right decisions.
We didn't either when we were there.
Sometimes, most of the time, they don't.
You know, my dad, here, you wonder about that. You know what my dad used to say about me, though? Son, you'll be fine once you get over Fool's Hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's true.
And that's
and
about
true as
25 to
individuals.
30 years old.
But
That's right.
it's not good to ignore the fact, like you mentioned our country, you know, ruling our country. It's not about the individuals, it's not about what decisions, I mean, we all have Fool's Hill, and no question about it. But if you look what our country was based on, it was based on the idea of we want to find a place that we can worship our God. Might be all kinds of differences in that, but what we did, and George, the Constitution was built on prayer, that's how they did it.
But they've lost that, so.
I don't think they've
But we're
lost
still
it.
alive,
but
we're still
They
alive.
lost it, not lost it, but they've
I know what you
fallen
It's
away
based
from
on-
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we
we
agree,
follow
we
it.
agree on that, so the question is, what do we do now? And we're at an age where we probably need to hurry.
You know what you're doing? You're asking all those questions that he said there. He says in those, what ifs? And that's where we are. That's where you're thinking, what if? What is this
But we're
occurred?
individual
What if we?
followers.
What if we had done so and so? Would this have made a difference here? We don't. All of us have self doubts. I have at times. I have them on me. I have one every Sunday morning. I'm serious. I really and truly have I know in my mind what I want to say. All right. I know that I have blocked out what needs to be done, but I still have issues, and I have to ask for guidance. All right, before I come in on Sunday morning. But that's where they were. He was saying, count your victories. All right, know what they were. I thought it was interesting, those victories. But sometimes it's easier to remember how we failed.
Yes.
You ever thought about that? Have you ever looked back and say, "Oh, what if I had done so and so?"
Yeah.
Oh, what did I say? Ooh, and so that's where we are, and that's what he's trying to say is throw that behind you. All right. My feelings is we should learn from our mistakes, but we don't. Sometimes we repeat them, but we should learn.
But we shouldn't deny them, and the fact that reality is we can't change them. The only hope we have is to learn from them and do it.
Amen.
Well,
God's
but
way.
put where they are. All right. They're 40 years getting there. But are they too late?
They're in God's time.
Well, that's true too. I agree with that. But how many times in our lives have we looked back and said, "Oh, I didn't get there on time. I'm too late." Have you ever done that? Rather than continue, you're thinking, "I'm too late." Yeah, they were late, but they were also the only nation at the bank of the Jordan River. So you're right. Who was watching out for them? Even though they were defiant, even though they could be trying to God, God says, "Okay, this is our promise to Abraham and all of his descendants, this land called the Promised Land." All right? And it's now your time. You're like that Olympic team. This is your time. And that's where he is, and that's what they're saying to us. Well, we are right now. Is this our time?
Better be.
It's the only time we got.
Okay, now tomorrow evening we're going to find out a little more about the Global Methodist Church and what it's about. But the fact being is, and Sue brought it up a while ago, is it our time? Is it time for us to move forward? I'm excited about some of the things we're already involved in and doing. So we're beginning, are we beginning a quest, as he asked in his article, in his book, to apply God's word in our world? That's what he was saying to the Israelites. It's time for you to apply. It's time for you to fish or cut bait. It's time to step in the water. They said, "With the river's flowing." God says, "Still step into the water. Take the ark and step in the water." And so they took the ark and they stepped in the water. What happened? There was a damming up of the Jordan River, and they were able to walk across.
On dry land.
Who did this? You see, God was still in the midst of it. He's still in our lives. Even though sometimes
Yeah.
I wonder, I said, "Oh, Lord," it's sort of like, It's sort of like this cartoon that Kathy Sue brought me this morning. It's from Family Circus. Y'all familiar with Family Circus? And the little girl is standing there. She's looking out the window and says, "Good morning, Lord." And in the next room, her daddy's saying, "Good Lord, it's morning." And so but that's where we are at times, all right? When we there, and that's what Moses is saying to the Israelites. That's what he's saying to us today. It's here. Review our victories. We've had them, but we don't think about them. He says review them and realize it and build from that. And that's what he's saying for us today. Well, you know, there are victories, but sometimes it's easier, as I said earlier, to think about our failures. You know, when was the last time you experienced a victory?
Say that again.
When was the last time you experienced a victory?
This morning, when I woke up. I said, praise God.
Well, and then Mike and I had a victory because he went back home and got the parts, and you got to see the clip. All right, that was a victory. And sometimes we don't think of victories in what we think. Well, I've had a fight and I'm victorious. But no, there are all sorts of little victories in our lives. Well, you know, we think about it. I was thinking he was talking about his brother playing football. Yeah. And they'd always go in, but they never had a victory. They never even scored a point.
That was really something.
So you think,
but they played the game.
But they played. That's it. That's the important thing. We're in it. All right. We may not be the absolute winners, but you know, and he said there, the good thing for the generation rest was that they could listen to Moses. Have you ever? Well, my voice just went up. Well, it's changed. But anyway, maybe I'm going back through puberty. But have you ever thought about that in our lives? About the victories that we have? Accepting Christ is a victory, isn't it?
Yes.
That's a major one in everybody's life.
That's the only significant
To
one.
accept that.
But how many? Mary Beth has made a comment though about how many have moved away from accepting that victory. How many people are? You know, we have all sorts of chaos going in the world today. We have them rebelling against the Star of David flags and all of this sort of thing. So who are some of the
rebelling against the police, against authority at all times?
EMTs.
But the thing is, that's the media.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the good things?
Yeah.
Do you ever see the
Well,
good
somebody
things?
said something the other day. Did you ever read the book In His Steps?
Right.
Did you read the book? Ever read the book In His Steps? The book is about a newspaper that chose not to print the bad, only print the good.
Yeah.
Guess what happened?
They went under.
They almost went under.
Yeah.
They had to change back. And you think,
Yeah.
that's tragic.
I know.
All right. Do you guess people don't want to come to church on Sunday morning to hear the good news? They would rather hear the bad.
We've been trained.
We don't give them the bad news. The church, that's part that's real.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, you know, if you really get down to it, we don't.
All right. Moses encouraged the Israelites. Her books encouraged the Olympians. Who are some of the people who encourage your life? Did you think about that when you read that question? Who's encouraged your life? Oh my
That's one
goodness.
of my reasons for coming to church
Well,
every
I'll
Sunday.
give you a real good example.
All right.
The lady right over there has encouraged me a lot.
Be
Because
careful.
she always has a smile on her face, and she always says something pleasant to you. She doesn't say, "Oh, you look ugly."
You haven't heard her talking. But she did say to me after I had been in hunting for 10 days in Colorado, if you want to kiss, you're going to shave.
That's right. So she encourages me to look at me.
Yeah.
So she encouraged me to shave. Because I had a 10-day beard.
Well, I've had more outsiders when I say outsiders, beyond my immediate family.
Yeah,
I've gotten more from them
Oh.
than my family, which to me is sad, but I mean, it's a fact for me. You know, I've had growth through outsiders.
That's right, other
But I
people.
think maybe a lot of us are that way. I mean, you know, we don't get it all from family.
I remember when I was growing up, my best friend's mother telling us, you go to church on Sunday, it's like a filling station. You go to church on Sunday to get filled up for the week. And that's encouragement, like,
Well, it
like
makes sense.
thinking people, you
Now
know.
get filled back up.
well, I still remember calculus professor by the name of Lurleen Stewart. And I would be in the grill dancing or having fun or doing it on the college campus. That was before Joy. But anyway, that's not big, don't get me wrong. We had a good time dancing and having fun together too. But anyway, don't get me. But she would come, she was a great encourager in a very quiet way. She would walk by me and I'm sitting there having a malt and a cheeseburger or a grilled cheese and say, Bob, you need to come to my room in my office because you made a mistake on your calculus exam, all right, and you need to talk about it. Well, that was the kind of encouragement I got, all right. And it got me to loving calculus, all right. Matter of fact, on the final exam, there was one question, or one equation she put there, and I worked 4 pages and got no answer. I kept getting back to where I was. And I went up and laid it and we looked at it and come to find out she intentionally changed the sign from a negative to a positive and it would not work, all right?
Divine.
But it would not resolve. And so but she did it intentionally to see how smart we were. If we would, you know, or we would throw in our hat and say, that's it won't work, and that sort of thing. So you know, there are people like that's encouraged you. I don't think there's a person here that hasn't had a teacher or a neighbor or an aunt or an uncle that has encouraged them in a lot of ways. And we'll see us for what it was. What was been a movie that was most motivational to you?
Rudy.
Rudy, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good movie.
That was a
I could recite Rudy, that was my grandson's favorite movie.
Yeah, I used to be able to. I love the music, I love it all, but the message.
Yeah.
This kid, and I read this somewhere. It was his dream to play on the Notre Dame. He was short. He had no athletic talent. He had, you know, it was a family of 15 kids, I think. You know, that.
So what you're
One
saying?
place said coal mine, the movie said steel mill, but at any rate, he was determined he was going to play for Notre Dame, and everybody laughed at him, and you don't have the teacher said, forget it, you don't, your scholastic ability is nothing, and he just kept on. And I read somewhere this quote, and I don't know if it was associated with that movie or not, but it said sometimes dreamers, let me get this right. Sometimes winners are dreamers because we kind of go, oh, he's just a dreamer. Sometimes winners are dreamers who just won't quit. And Rudy just wouldn't quit.
And I remember a section of that movie where he practiced every practice and got beat up so bad.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the players said, why would you do that? That's just foolish. He said, y'all won't be as good on Saturday if you don't have somebody to play against on the weekdays. I mean, he had such a good
And he
attitude.
had dyslexia early on. And one of his, somebody he got in contact with in college at Holy Cross, he wormed his way into Holy Cross. No money, no skill, no nothing.
But any other motivational movies besides Rudy?
And
Or
that,
the Quiet
and that,
Miracle
and
on
that was
Ice?
a motivational speech
Yeah.
by Gara Parsegian to
Yeah.
when he was a little kid, but it was to that team.
I liked Forrest Gump.
Oh, yeah.
that was good.
All right.
He was a guy that didn't understand that he had problems. And whatever he attempted, he would keep at it until
didn't
he
have the problem.
succeeded.
But where did he get that from?
You got a lot of it from
His mother.
His mother.
Yeah, yeah. He had an
See,
encouragement.
that was there.
Yeah.
How would you describe your ability in directions?
What?
Your directions. What's your ability in directions? I'm good with directions, or please don't give directions. I can only follow the dot on the Google map. You know. I have an app on my map, and it shows me where I am at any time. You know, when we're driving, and goes that.
The worst experience I had was one time I was with my sister, who is an avid traveler, has been her whole life, so she would get a map. One of those maps with all the stuff on it, you know, a regular map. Look at it and tell you exactly where she's going. We get in the car one day and she hands me the map and she said, "Man, you be the
Navigator.
Yeah, I said, "You got to be kidding!"
Where are we
I
now,
didn't even
and where are
start
we
for an
going?
instant to figure out where we were or where we were going. So I'm gonna look at the Google map.
I'm the one that gets into the car with somebody else and here, Mark, you're the navigator.
You too,
Well, I'll
Google.
tell this tale. My husband, whenever we're going somewhere and all of a sudden we realize we've taken the wrong, don't know exactly where we are, he literally freaks out. And I wish I'd come and
Remember, this is being televised.
I'll turn, I'll make as many turns as necessary
All
to
right.
get back where I need to go. We're just different.
I'm
That's
hearing
not
all of
the point.
this.
We're just different.
Do you think Moses was hearing the same thing?
Sure.
Sure.
Can you imagine what he was saying? It wasn't like Scott saying, "Oh, how many of them were saying, where are you taking us? What are we doing? You know, we ought to go back to Egypt." And, you know, so we have it.
There's somebody like, we'll get there. We just gotta keep.
Well, and that's Joy just asked a question. Is there anybody in that group that felt like they should listen to him? Obviously, Generation Rest listens. The younger, the generation says, "Wait a minute." They heard him. How many times have we said things and people really didn't hear it or didn't understand what we said sometimes? But the fact being is, they heard him, and that was the important thing. But why did they hear him?
That's what I want to know.
They were still open-minded and
But why?
took in information like a spoon.
They watched what happened to their parents.
Well, they saw that, but the fact being is, who was their inspiration?
Moses.
Well, Moses was speaking for God, all right, I agree with that. But God was there, he was having all of these things involved with it. And so when you think about it, he's told them it's never too late.
Well, it seems to me that first generation, this was not what they expected. They thought they were gonna just go and be there. So they were very disappointed in how things were going. This younger generation didn't have expectations like that. They didn't.
They were along for the journey.
Yeah, well,
kind of
and
had to
they
be.
listened. You know, there's gotta be a better way than this, and
Well, I have to wonder if maybe some of the adults in the first generation didn't stick with Moses out of faith.
Maybe.
well, that was, yeah.
You know,
They wanted
you
out of
take any
slavery.
group, not all of them are gonna be 100% wrong, not all of them are gonna be 100% right.
But it goes back to like what Mary Beth said, you see something needs to be done, but how do you do it?
Well, there were those in the first group that probably asked us, okay, what do you need to do?
Well,
And I would be willing to wager you that second generation took their lesson from the ones that were asking that question, instead of the ones that were saying, "Hey, what are we doing out here? We need to go back."
Well, let me ask this question. Did they not know that they would not enter the promised land?
I think they
Were
were
they,
told, weren't
were they
Well,
told that they would?
Moses was the only one who was told.
they? Oh.
Yeah, but what about the rest
The
of them?
rest of them, I think they realized it, and God was going, "You've been such boneheaded
Hard-headed.
and won't listen. You're not going to get in there. You're going to die before you get there." That's why they were there 40 years. And you got to realize, God's more in control than we think He is.
Well, he was control of that because.
But I mean, He's seeing how things done, and so it works here. So when you get to thinking about the book of Deuteronomy, thinking about it, what was your previous impression of it before you started reading it this way?
Boring.
Boring. As a matter of fact, he says that in the very beginning.
Yeah.
He says usually when you get back to the fourth chapter, throw it out of the way and go on, you know.
Try
It's
to
sort of
go back
like,
and read it again and do the same thing.
it's sort of like we're now in what, a week into Lent. A week ago today was Ash Wednesday, right? All right. And the first starting off, it's not, I was reading a beautiful devotional this morning from a young lady by the name of Sarah Kent. And she was talking about the first week, I have no trouble giving up what I'm going to give up. But then it gets into the second week. And I'm finding myself not as being determined as I was. And so she says, in this 40 days, how bad am I going to get unless God helps me get back to where I need to be? And so that's what, when we think about the book of Deuteronomy, I think a lot of people think of Deuteronomy like they think of not Ecclesiastes, but Leviticus.
Yeah.
Because Leviticus is all law. You know, it's boring. My daughter said that she'd read the Bible in a month. I wonder how long it took her to get through Leviticus. Because Leviticus is about as encouraging. You know, it's not enjoyable. To me it wasn't. You know.
Well, that's like we get to the end of the Bible.
So what were the reasons the generation test wandered for 40 years? What were the reasons? They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, when they could have been there in 11 days.
I think part of the time that Moses was waiting for some of those of the older generation to die out because they weren't going to go into the promised land.
But why was he waiting on them, though, Francis? Did Moses understand that there's a few boneheaded old coots here that need to get out of here before we get to where we're going?
Well, they didn't want to do what they
Needed to do.
The Bible, Deuteronomy tells us that they did not do, they kept questioning God, or arguing with God, or complaining to God. And so he tried to help them. He gave them water, he gave them manna, he gave them direction, a flame and a cloud. What did he do?
Well, they didn't follow the Joshua and Caleb on the spy situation.
Yeah.
They followed the others.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what God wanted.
So they didn't.
This was the same generation that, when Moses went up on the mountain to get the Ten Commandments, they built a golden calf and started worshiping it because they just said, well, he's gone and he'll never come back.
Right.
And we're gonna do our thing.
And he comes back, and what does he look like? Right. But do you realize who the leaders were in that rebellion and building the golden calf?
Yeah.
Aaron and his sister Miriam.
Yeah.
I mean, has that ever happened to you?
Family members.
Has it ever happened, the fact being that all of a sudden, I don't know how you are, but I remember sitting in the barracks or somewhere, and everybody would be talking, and we're going to start telling a joke, and the next joke got worse, or it got worse, or got worse. And, you know, and by the time you got around to you, you were saying, oh my goodness, I don't think I can top any of these. But so that's what happens in our lives. We start drifting away from the direction we want. So,
well, don't you think also there was probably people that didn't want to go?
Well, yeah.
From Egypt?
oh yeah, that's always.
People wanted to go back before they left.
You've got to go. And so anyway, they put, okay, we'll go, but we don't want to go. Well, you have that group too.
Well, it's sort of like,
what am I doing here?
it was right. That was one of the theme lines in one of the movies Joy and I were watching. They were going, but really didn't want to go across the plains. They didn't really, you know. Why can't we just stop here and build this sort of thing? You know, what is an incorrect perspective of you that others might make?
Well, Joyce Moore thought I had good sense, and that was wrong.
I remember.
I got through it.
I went to work for the Division of American Hospital many years ago. I was always a very confident individual. And there was a lady that when I came in to interview to work for him in Dallas, and I walked into the offices, and she was a receptionist as well as a switchboard operator. Which I'm dating myself when I got switchboard operator. And she and I became very good friends. And you know what she said to me? She said, "You remember the first day you walked in through the door?" And I said, "Yes." She says, "I thought you were the most arrogant SOB I ever met."
That's because you walking in.
No, but she said you had such an arrogant, such a determined, nothing was going to get to you. And I thought, did I give that impression? I mean, in my own mind, I didn't think of giving out that impression. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had people look at you and think, well, you're not really like what I thought you were? And so those are the things we look into in life. So when people have different perspectives of us at times, have you ever thought about perspective that, what are you transmitting in your life, in your attitudes, in your actions, and so forth? Now you're going to all back off. Now I'm giving you mine. I haven't heard yours. All right. Have you ever had anything like that where somebody thought you were different than what you really are?
Well, when I was young, and I didn't talk a lot, really, I was very quiet, believe it or not.
What happened?
But where I worked, and I come find out later, these ladies said I was snobbish.
Oh, yeah, well, they do
I
think
was
that.
snobby. They didn't
Shy
like me, and
people.
I'm thinking,
Lots
well,
of them think
everybody
so.
likes me.
Well, that's
Everybody likes you now.
That's
Well,
right,
it's-
started talking.
You know how that is, but oh yeah, they thought I was very snotty. They didn't think that I did.
I worked for the state for 39 years in a job that when I first came there, I thought I knew it all. And by the time I left, I realized I didn't know hardly anything in that 39 years. But my supervisor actually came back, and after he had retired, came back and worked with me on a project. And one night we were just having a heartfelt discussion, and he said, "You were the most difficult SOB in the whole office to work with."
Can believe that, Mike.
But I came to realize that you don't pay any attention to politics in the office. And that's why I would ask your opinion, and I would get from you what you honestly thought. No consideration about what that might do to your career or anything else. But I had a boss after he retired that called me into his office one day, and he says, why is everybody in this office other than you against me? And I said, I don't agree with all your decisions, but it's not my place, because you have knowledge that you're applying from your people that are above you that I don't have. So why should I complain about you?
That's a good thought.
So as a person, I didn't respect him very much, but because of his office, I respected the office enough to give him my honest opinions.
Well, it's like, yeah, it is right. It's like being in the military. There were people above me that I didn't have great respect for. But guess what? They outranked me, and they got my salute and my.
That's right.
That's all. What was your greatest victories?
Greatest victory.
Yeah. What are some of your greatest
To
victories?
have my children?
Yeah.
All right, that's a great victory.
Children.
I got one over here. So but think about your great victories.
Having a wife that's been willing to put up with me for 53 years now.
Well,
That's a great victory.
Yeah, I can say that myself. My
I've been
greatest
for
victory.
37 years here.
Yes.
And one final question. Why was no other nation knocking at the door to enter the promised land? Even though they were 40 years late, why was nobody else wanting
Because
to?
that was God's promise. That's why they called it the promise.
He didn't promise it to anybody else.
That's right.
He
Well, there were people already there though.
Good nation and strong and
Kevin?
Courage.
All right. Mike,
Sir.
let's see what victory is like. Give them this one.
Okay, now, is this number 2 of the
Yeah.
series?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is number 2 up here.
And if you can't hear, come forward. 'cause
Come
it's-
forward if you can't hear. But most of it's gonna be the action more than you're gonna hear.
I gotta go pick up Albert. Told him I'd be there.
Gonna take a second. Come back up together.
Yeah, those lights will slow down because it won't get overheated.
Too hot, yeah. And this slowly comes up, so it doesn't overheat the LED too quick.
Yeah, this is only gonna be a minute long when the end of it. It was the second one we put in there.
They skated
Yeah,
on
there
the
you
ice
go.
and played a fundraising exhibition game, just 3 days before the start of the Olympics. But to their opponents on this night, it wasn't just an exhibition. Because any time the Soviet Union's top team played against Americans, they played to win. The Soviets had just recently embarrassed the NHL All-Stars in a 3-game series, winning the Challenge Cup on American ice. With the Olympics only days away, they were rolling over opponents like a red tidal wave. They were the red medalists, and they wore the CCCP across their chests.
Yeah, we got that one.
Very, very intimidating.
Is that the second one?
That's what it said, that's what I was asking. This is not the one that you sent me, this was the second in the series of what we just watched. If this
No,
is-
the second one, the cinch is what I wanted.
Okay, let's get out of this then.
We get crushed. And we thought, these guys are in another world. They just kicked.
Okay, go back and open my email and get to the second one.
Cause that one is gonna run about 15 minutes and then.
Yeah, it'd probably be good.
I told him I'd be there.
Okay,
That's
final
the
minute.
final minute.
We'll see you later.
Oh, yeah, I'll be back.
I don't ever watch hockey, but for some reason I watched that actual game.
Well, that was a very important episode in the live United States.
Plus,
I do remember the line, yeah, everybody so excited.
Who left that? That was Brooks who left that. Big Brooks.
Russia was the big.
Big Brooks.
Question about the way the Russians were playing, or the situation going back.
You guess it was like that when they crossed over the Jordan River? Okay, folks, I thank you for today. Read the second chapter, yes. Yeah.
I wanted
Tor
to-
wants to say something.
I wanted to tell y'all, I told Brenda that I would take over the responsibility of the kitchen. We just need to be sure that it's clean and that it's kept up to where it needs to be. And I figured the best way to do that is to all get involved in it. So I thought this was the best group, small group that we could pull together and kind of have a planning meeting of how to do this. My thought is that we assign people areas of the kitchen that they would be responsible for, and that if they need help, they would ask other people to help them, but so that a continuous thing would happen. It wouldn't just be every 3 months we're gonna clean the kitchen. It would be an ongoing thing involving a lot of people to get the job done.
No way it stays clean all the time.
Yes, and if people come in that don't go to church here, you don't want them to walk in the kitchen and think, I don't know that I'd want to eat here, you know, we want it to look decent and clean. But, so, I've got a pot of potato soup and some cornbread in there if you want to have a cup of soup and help make some plans. Lay out a formula of how we're going to do this. I would really appreciate it. And I know this is just a small group, but I thought it was better to start with just a small group and then we'll reach out into everybody else to get more help. So the soup's in the kitchen and we can come in
So if
here
you want
with
soup,
it.
you're gonna pay for it. I'm taking an obligation.
In other words, the soup's not free.
We're not gonna do any cleaning today.
Not gonna do any cleaning today.
Yeah.
But those are the, you know.
So if you
I'm
wanna
sure-
get some